The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly across the red mesa as Jake Morrison guided his weathered stallion up the rocky trail. Dust clung to his leather chaps and sweat carved clean lines through the dirt on his weathered face. At 32, he'd learned to read the desert like scripture. Every shadow promised either shelter or danger. His ranch lay 3 miles south, a modest spread of scrubland where he raised horses that city folk called difficult and he called honest. Unlike people, horses didn't lie about their intentions. They didn't promise forever and leave before sunrise. The ridge offered the best view of his property, a daily ritual that helped him plan the next day's work. But as Jake crested the hill, his stallion suddenly snorted and shied sideways. There, 20 feet ahead, something massive and golden lay motionless against a cluster of red rocks. Jake dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on loose gravel. The shape resolved into wings, enormous wings spread wide like a broken cross. A golden eagle, larger than any he'd seen, lay on her side with one wing twisted at an unnatural angle, but she wasn't dead. Dark, fierce eyes tracked his movement as he approached. No fear, no panic, just a steady, intelligent gaze that seemed to pierce straight through him. Her beak was slightly open, breathing labored but determined. A proud creature brought low, yet somehow maintaining her dignity even in defeat. "Easy there, girl," Jake murmured, though he suspected she understood more than most humans he'd known. "What happened to you?" The eagle's head lifted slightly, those penetrating eyes never leaving his face. In that moment, something strange happened. Jake felt a recognition he couldn't name. Here was another survivor, another creature who'd learned that the world could be beautiful and cruel in the same breath. He knelt carefully, noting the way she didn't flinch. Smart bird. She knew he meant no harm somehow. "You're hurt bad, aren't you?" His voice, usually gruff and practical, softened. "That wing's not going to heal right on its own." The eagle's gaze seemed to intensify as if she were asking a question. Jake had spent years avoiding anything that needed taking care of. Horses were business, not attachment. But something about this magnificent creature's silent plea reached a place in his chest he'd thought was permanently closed. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't leave her here to die. Not when she looked at him like that. Not when she looked at him like she knew he needed saving too. Jake's hands moved with surprising gentleness as he removed his heavy canvas coat. The eagle watched every movement, her breathing shallow but steady. 3 years of doctoring injured horses had taught him patience, but this felt different, more personal. "I'm gonna wrap you up, girl. Might not like it, but it's the only way to get you home safe." He approached slowly, speaking in low, steady tones. "My pa used to say eagles were the proudest creatures God made. Too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to give up." Jake's weathered hands hovered over her injured wing. "Guess we got that in common." To his amazement, the eagle remained still as he carefully positioned the coat around her body, securing the wounded wing against her side. Her eyes never left his face, not trusting exactly, but accepting his help with a dignity that humbled him. The ride back to his ranch was careful and slow. Jake cradled the eagle against his chest, feeling the strong, rapid beat of her heart through the fabric. His stallion, usually eager to get home to feed and rest, seemed to understand the gravity of their passenger and moved with unusual care. Jake's ranch house was simple: 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and windows that faced both sunrise and sunset. Behind it stood a sturdy barn where he kept his horses and equipment. But it was the small shed beside the barn where he took the eagle. Years ago, he'd used this space to quarantine sick horses. Now, as he prepared a bed of clean straw and set up a shallow dish of water, it felt like preparing a sanctuary. "This ain't much," he told her as he gently settled her onto the straw. "But it's quiet. Safe. You can heal here." The eagle lifted her head to survey her new surroundings. Jake had expected panic, the wild thrashing of a creature desperate for sky and freedom. Instead, she seemed to take inventory of the space with the same careful attention she'd given him on the ridge. "You hungry?" Jake fetched a piece of jerky from his saddlebag, tearing it into small pieces. "I'll get you something better tomorrow, but this'll do for now." As he placed the meat within reach, their eyes met again. In the soft light filtering through the shed's single window, her gaze seemed almost grateful. Jake found himself lingering, reluctant to leave. "I ain't much for conversation," he admitted. "Haven't had company in..." Well, a long time, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need. That night he lay in his narrow bed listening to the desert wind and thinking about the trust he'd seen in those fierce eyes. When had anyone, human or animal, looked at him like that? When had anyone needed him for something more than breaking horses or mending fences? Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and Jake found himself worrying whether the sound would frighten his unexpected guest. 3 days passed in a rhythm Jake had never known. Each morning, before checking his horses or planning the day's work, he visited the eagle. He'd named her Liberty, though he'd never spoken the name aloud, afraid it might sound foolish. "Morning, girl," he'd say, bringing fresh water and strips of rabbit meat he'd started hunting specifically for her. "How's that wing feeling?" Liberty would lift her head at the sound of his voice, those dark eyes alert and focused. The swelling had gone down, and she'd begun accepting food directly from his hand, a trust that amazed and humbled him. On the 4th morning, Jake brought his late father's veterinary bag, its leather worn smooth from decades of use. "Pa taught me some things about fixing what's broken," he told her. "Might be I can help that wing heal straighter." Working with infinite patience, Jake examined the injury. The break was clean, painful but repairable with time and care. He fashioned a splint from thin wood and soft cloth, talking her through each step. "This is gonna feel strange, but it'll keep everything in place while you mend." His calloused fingers worked with surprising delicacy. "My pa used to say healing takes 3 things: time, patience, and hope. I got the first 2. Working on the 3rd? Liberty bore the examination with remarkable composure, as if she understood he was trying to help. When he finished, she settled back onto the straw with what seemed like relief. "There now," Jake said softly. "Give it a few weeks and you might be ready to try those wings again." But even as he said it, Jake felt an unexpected pang. The thought of Liberty leaving, of returning to her solitary life in the sky, left him feeling more alone than he had in years. That afternoon, as he worked on repairing fence posts, Jake found himself talking to the empty air, practicing conversations he planned to have with Liberty later. He told her about the drought of '82, about the morning he'd found an entire herd of wild horses drinking from his well, about the sunset that had painted the whole desert purple just last week. When evening came, he lingered in the shed longer than necessary, sharing his simple dinner and finding comfort in her quiet presence. "You know what's strange?" he said, offering her a piece of fresh trout he'd caught in the creek. "I thought I liked the quiet, thought I didn't need anybody. But having you here, it's like the silence ain't so heavy anymore." Liberty's head tilted slightly, as if she were listening not just to his words but to something deeper, the loneliness he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it had a name. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and Jake realized he was no longer eager for Liberty to heal and fly away. 2 weeks had transformed Jake's routine completely. His morning visits to Liberty now included detailed reports about the weather, the horses, and plans for expanding the ranch. She listened with the kind of attention he'd never received from another living soul. "That storm last night reminded me of something," Jake said, settling beside her with his morning coffee. Liberty's wing was healing well. The splint would come off soon, but she seemed content to stay and recover fully. "I was maybe 10 years old and my ma was still alive. Lightning struck so close to the house it lit up the whole world white as noon." Liberty's eyes followed him as he spoke, and Jake found himself sharing memories he'd never told anyone. "Ma grabbed me and we ran to the root cellar. Instead of being scared, she started laughing, this wild, joyful sound. She said storms reminded her that nature was bigger than any of our problems." Jake's voice softened. "Lost her the next winter to pneumonia. Pa never laughed after that." To his surprise, Liberty made a soft sound, not quite a cry but something gentler. Comfort, maybe. Understanding. Jake had started leaving the shed door open during the day, allowing Liberty to hop outside into the small enclosed area behind the barn. She couldn't fly yet, but she could spread her good wing and feel the sun on her feathers. Today, as Jake repaired a broken bridle, he noticed Liberty watching his hands work the leather with the same intensity she'd once reserved for hunting prey. When he looked up, she was closer than usual, close enough that he could see individual feathers, each one perfect and golden brown. "You're beautiful," he said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Strongest thing I've ever seen." Liberty stepped closer still until she was almost within arm's reach. Slowly, carefully, Jake extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she moved forward and allowed him to stroke the feathers along her neck. The softness surprised him. Beneath all that wild strength was something delicate, vulnerable. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if he were touching something sacred. "I've been thinking," Jake said, his hand still moving softly along her feathers. "When that wing's healed, you're going to want to go back to the sky. That's where you belong." His voice caught slightly. "But I want you to know you'll always have a place here. If you ever need rest or shelter or just company." Liberty's head tilted, those intelligent eyes studying his face intently. Then to his amazement, she leaned into his touch just slightly, but enough to let him know she understood. As the afternoon sun slanted through the shed's window, Jake realized something had changed between them. This wasn't just about healing a wounded creature anymore. This was about two souls who'd found something neither had known they were looking for. "Tomorrow I'll take that splint off," he told her. "See how strong you've gotten." But part of him hoped she'd choose to stay a little longer. The morning Jake removed Liberty's splint dawned clear and bright, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and possibility. His hands shook slightly as he unwound the careful bandages, not from nervousness about the procedure, but from knowing what came next. "Look at that," he murmured as the last of the cloth fell away. Liberty's wing extended smoothly, no sign of the break that had brought them together 6 weeks ago. Good as new. Maybe better. Liberty stretched both wings wide, testing their strength. Jake's heart swelled with pride and broke a little at the same time. She was magnificent, every inch the wild, free creature she'd been before the fall. He opened the shed door wide and stepped back. "Go ahead, girl. See how it feels?" Liberty hopped to the doorway but didn't immediately launch into flight. Instead, she looked back at Jake with those dark, intelligent eyes that had first captured his heart on the ridge. "It's okay," Jake said, though his voice was thick. "You belong up there." "I always knew that." Still, Liberty hesitated. She moved to where Jake stood and did something that took his breath away. She gently touched her beak to his hand. Just for a moment, but it was unmistakably deliberate. A goodbye, a thank you. Then she spread her wings and launched into the morning sky. Jake watched her climb higher and higher, circling the ranch in wide, graceful spirals. His chest felt empty and full at the same time, proud of her strength, devastated by the loss, grateful for the time they'd shared. Just as he was about to turn away, Liberty dove back down. Jake's heart leaped, thinking something was wrong, but she landed gracefully on the fence post nearest to where he stood. For a long moment they looked at each other, then Liberty did something that changed everything. She settled onto the post as if she meant to stay. "You sure about this?" Jake asked softly. "The whole sky's waiting for you." Liberty's response was to hop down from the post and walk back toward the shed, not as a wounded creature seeking shelter, but as a partner choosing to stay. Jake understood then that healing wasn't always about returning things to exactly the way they were before. Sometimes it was about discovering what you could become together. "All right then," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I guess we're partners now." That evening, as Jake sat on his porch with his coffee, Liberty perched beside him on a wooden perch he'd quickly constructed. The desert stretched endlessly before them, painted gold and crimson by the setting sun. "You know what I think?" Jake said, reaching out to gently stroke her neck feathers. "I think sometimes the bravest thing isn't flying away from what scares you. Sometimes it's choosing to stay and build something new." Liberty's soft call seemed to agree. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Jake realized his solitary life hadn't ended. It had been transformed into something richer, deeper and more beautiful than he'd ever imagined possible. The wounded eagle had chosen the cowboy, and the cowboy had learned that love didn't always mean letting go. Sometimes it meant holding on and growing together. 3 months into their partnership, Jake had redesigned his entire morning routine around Liberty. She'd claimed the tallest fence post near the house as her perch, and from there she surveyed the ranch with the keen eye of a co-owner rather than a guest. "Morning, partner," Jake called as he stepped onto the porch with his coffee. Liberty responded with a soft trill that had become their daily greeting. She'd learned to recognize the sound of his boots on the wooden boards and was always waiting when he emerged. Today brought visitors, the first Jake had received in over 2 years. A dusty wagon rolled up the main trail carrying Tom Bradley, the territorial livestock inspector, and his teenage son, Marcus. Jake had known Tom since childhood, but he tensed as he watched the man's eyes widen at the sight of Liberty. "Jake Morrison, I'll be damned," Tom called out, tipping his hat. "Heard rumors you'd taken up with unusual company, but I figured folks were pulling my leg." "She's got a name," Jake said, stepping protectively closer to Liberty's perch. "This is Liberty." Marcus, a gangly boy of about 16, stared in open wonder. "Pa, is that really a golden eagle? I ain't never seen one so close to people before." "She was hurt," Jake explained, surprised by his own defensive tone. "I helped her heal. She chose to stay." Tom's weathered face showed skepticism mixed with concern. "Jake, you know eagles ain't meant for keeping. Territory's got laws about wild birds, especially protected ones like golden eagles." Jake's jaw tightened. "She's not kept. She's free to leave any time she wants. Post is open, skies wide. She stays because she wants to." As if understanding the conversation, Liberty spread her wings, not to fly away, but in a display of magnificent strength that made both visitors step back in awe. Then she settled back onto her perch and fixed Tom with a steady, intelligent stare. "Well, I'll be," Tom muttered. "Never seen anything like it." Jake seized the moment. "She helps with the ranch work, Tom. Watches for cattle thieves, warns me about storms coming. Best partner I've ever had, it was true. Liberty had proven remarkably useful. Her sharp eyes could spot a loose horse from miles away, and she'd twice alerted Jake to approaching strangers with loud, specific calls that had saved him from potential trouble. "Pa," Marcus whispered. "Look how gentle she is with him." Indeed, as they spoke, Liberty had hopped down from her perch to Jake's shoulder, a position that had taken weeks of careful trust building to achieve. Her talons gripped his leather vest securely but gently, never leaving a mark. Tom shook his head slowly. 20 years I've been inspecting ranches, and I ain't never seen anything to match this." "You sure she ain't just waiting for mating season to find herself a proper eagle husband?" Jake felt a strange pang at the suggestion. "Guess we'll see when the time comes. But for now, this is where she wants to be." As the Bradley wagon rolled away an hour later, Jake heard Marcus pestering his father with excited questions about the eagle. Tom's final words lingered. "Just remember, Jake, wild things got wild hearts. Don't get too attached to something that belongs to the sky." That evening, as Jake and Liberty shared their usual sunset watch, he found himself studying her profile against the crimson horizon. "Tom's probably right," he said quietly. "Come spring, you might hear the call of your own kind. Might need to find yourself a mate, start a family." Liberty turned her head to look at him directly, those dark eyes unreadable in the fading light. "Just promise me something," Jake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "If that day comes, don't just disappear. Let me know you're going. Give me a chance to say goodbye proper." Liberty's soft call seemed like a promise, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful partnership was about to face its greatest test. Word of Jake's unusual partnership spread faster than a grass fire through the territory. Within a week, curious visitors began appearing, some seeking to see the tamed eagle for themselves, others bringing warnings about territorial regulations and the dangers of keeping wild birds. The most persistent visitor was Dr. Eleanor Whitman, a naturalist from the territorial capital, who arrived on a Tuesday morning with enough equipment to study an entire flock. She was a woman of perhaps 40, with intelligent gray eyes and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of being the only woman in rooms full of men who underestimated her. "Mr. Morrison," she said briskly, setting down her leather satchel, "I've come to document what may be the most remarkable human-animal partnership in recorded territorial history." Jake found himself oddly defensive. "She's not a specimen, ma'am. She's my partner." "Which is precisely what makes this so extraordinary," Dr. Whitman replied, her eyes immediately finding Liberty on her customary perch. "May I observe her behavior? I promise not to interfere with your routine." For 3 days, Dr. Whitman watched and documented every interaction between Jake and Liberty. She noted how Liberty warned Jake of approaching weather with specific calls, how she positioned herself to watch different sections of the ranch during his work, and most remarkably, how she seemed to respond to his spoken requests with intelligent cooperation. "This challenges everything we understand about golden eagle behavior," Dr. Whitman told Jake on her final evening. "Eagles don't typically form partnerships with humans. They're solitary hunters, fiercely independent. Maybe Liberty's different, Jake suggested, unconsciously reaching up to stroke the eagle's neck feathers as she perched on his shoulder. Or maybe, Dr. Whitman said thoughtfully, she recognizes something in you that speaks to her wild nature rather than opposing it. You're not trying to domesticate her. You're living alongside her as an equal. That night, after Dr. Whitman had retired to the guest room Jake had hastily prepared, he sat with Liberty under a sky brilliant with stars. She wants to write about us, he told Liberty. Says our story could help people understand that wild things and civilized folks don't always have to be enemies. Liberty's response was to lean into his touch, a gesture of trust that still amazed him months later. But their peaceful evening was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Too many horses, moving too fast for a social visit. Jake stood quickly and Liberty immediately took flight, circling overhead with sharp warning cries. 6 men rode into the yard, led by Sheriff Coleman and what appeared to be a federal marshal. Jake's heart sank as he recognized the look of official business on their faces. "Jake Morrison," the marshal called out. "I'm Marshal Davis, Territorial Wildlife Authority. We've received complaints about your illegal keeping of a protected golden eagle." "She's not kept," Jake replied, echoing his earlier words to Tom Bradley. "She's free to leave any time." "That bird should be in the wild, son," Sheriff Coleman said, his tone apologetic but firm. "It ain't natural what you got here." Above them, Liberty's cries grew more agitated. She could sense the tension, the threat to their partnership. "Look up there," Jake said, pointing to where Liberty circled. "Does that look like a caged bird to you? She could fly away right now if she wanted to. She chooses to stay." Marshal Davis pulled out an official document. "I've got orders to relocate that eagle to a more suitable habitat, away from human influence. For her own good." Jake felt his world tilting. "You can't take her. She's not property, she's family." The words hung in the desert air like a challenge. Around them the posse shifted uncomfortably, while overhead, Liberty's cries echoed across the mesa like a wild lament. The standoff in Jake's yard stretched into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by Liberty's agitated calls from above. Dr. Whitman emerged from the house, drawn by the commotion, her scientific curiosity immediately engaged by the unfolding drama. "Marshal Davis," she said, stepping forward with quiet authority. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Whitman, territorial naturalist. Before you proceed, you should know I've been documenting this eagle's behavior for 3 days." The marshal tipped his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, I appreciate your interest, but federal law is clear about keeping wild eagles." "But this eagle isn't being kept," Dr. Whitman replied firmly. "She's choosing to cohabitate." "There's a significant difference both legally and ethically." Jake felt a surge of gratitude toward the unexpected ally. Above them, Liberty's flight pattern shifted. Instead of random circling, she began flying in deliberate formations that caught everyone's attention. "Watch her," Jake called out to the assembled men. "Really watch." Liberty dove low over the group, then soared back up before landing precisely on her usual fence post. From there, she fixed the marshal with a steady, unflinching stare. "Sir," young Deputy Harrison said nervously, "that bird don't look scared or trapped. Looks like she's choosing." Marshal Davis frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation's complexity. "Federal guidelines don't account for unusual circumstances like this." "Then maybe," Dr. Whitman suggested, "we should document what we're witnessing before making any irreversible decisions. This partnership could revolutionize our understanding of human-wildlife coexistence." Sheriff Coleman, who'd known Jake since childhood, stepped forward. "Marshal, what if we postpone any action for a week? Let Dr. Whitman complete her study. If the bird's truly wild and free, she'll prove it herself." Jake's heart hammered as he watched the marshal consider the proposal. Everything depended on this moment. Not just his happiness, but Liberty's right to choose her own path. 1 week, Marshal Davis finally conceded. "But if there's any evidence of the bird being constrained or harmed by human contact, she'll be relocated immediately." As the official party prepared to leave, Dr. Whitman approached Jake privately. "You've got 7 days to prove that Liberty stays because she wants to, not because she's dependent." "Can you do that?" Jake looked up at Liberty, who had begun preening her feathers with the casual confidence of a creature completely at ease. "She'll prove it herself, ma'am. She always has." That night after their visitors had departed, Jake sat with Liberty under a star-filled sky that felt less certain than before. "You hear all that, girl?" he asked softly. "They want proof you're still wild, still free. Question is, are you?" Liberty's response was to launch herself into the darkness, disappearing completely for the first time since her wing had healed. Jake's heart lurched, wondering if the stress of the day had finally driven her away. But 20 minutes later, she returned with a rabbit, freshly caught, unmistakably wild prey. She landed beside Jake and dropped the rabbit at his feet before settling onto her perch with what could only be described as satisfaction. "Still got your hunting instincts," Jake murmured, understanding her message. "Still wild when you choose to be." Liberty's soft trill seemed to say, "Exactly. Can a bond built on choice survive when the whole world demands proof?" The week that followed tested every aspect of Jake and Liberty's partnership. Dr. Whitman established a discreet observation post on the ridge where Jake had first found Liberty, documenting their interactions from dawn to dusk with scientific precision. Jake tried to maintain their normal routine, but the pressure of being watched made every gesture feel artificial. Liberty, however, seemed unaffected by the scrutiny. If anything, she appeared more determined to demonstrate her capabilities. On the second day, she proved her hunting independence by disappearing for hours and returning with increasingly impressive prey: rabbits, ground squirrels, even a young coyote that had been threatening Jake's chickens. Each kill was clean, professional, undeniably wild. "Remarkable," Dr. Whitman noted, showing Jake her detailed observations. "She's maintaining all her natural behaviors while also participating in domestic ranch activities. It's as if she's bilingual, fluent in both wild and civilized worlds." The real test came on the fourth day when a violent thunderstorm rolled across the desert. Jake had always worried about how Liberty would handle severe weather, but she surprised him by taking charge of the situation. As dark clouds gathered, Liberty began a series of specific calls that Jake had learned meant storm coming. But this time she added something new: sharp, directional cries that seemed designed to guide Jake's horses toward the safety of the barn. "She's herding them," Dr. Whitman observed in amazement, watching through her field glasses as Liberty coordinated an aerial ballet that moved the entire herd to shelter before the rain began. When the storm hit with full fury, Liberty didn't seek the artificial shelter of Jake's shed. Instead, she perched on the barn's highest beam, wings spread for balance, riding out the wind and rain with the fierce joy of a creature born to challenge the elements. "Look at her," Jake breathed, watching Liberty's silhouette against the lightning-illuminated sky. "She's not enduring the storm, she's dancing with it." Dr. Whitman's pencil moved rapidly across her notebook. "This changes everything. She's not becoming domesticated, she's expanding what it means to be wild." The next morning brought Marshal Davis and his men for their final inspection. Jake's mouth was dry as he watched them approach, knowing that Liberty's fate and his own future hung in the balance. "Well, Dr. Whitman?" the Marshal asked. "What's your professional assessment?" Dr. Whitman stood straight, her voice carrying the authority of scientific certainty. "In my professional opinion, this eagle demonstrates complete autonomy and self-determination. She hunts wild prey, navigates severe weather, and maintains all natural behaviors. Her partnership with Mr. Morrison represents evolution, not captivity." Marshal Davis studied Liberty, who sat regally on her perch, showing no fear of the armed men. "And you believe she could leave any time she chooses?" "Watch this," Jake said quietly. He walked to Liberty's perch and spoke a single word: "Free." Without hesitation, Liberty launched herself skyward, climbing higher and higher until she was just a speck against the blue. Jake's heart clenched, wondering if this demonstration would become a permanent goodbye. But after 5 minutes of soaring at heights that proved her complete liberty, Liberty dove back down in a spectacular display of aerial mastery, landing precisely on her chosen perch with the dignity of a queen returning to her throne. The silence that followed was profound. "Well," Marshal Davis said finally, "I've never seen anything like that in 20 years of wildlife law enforcement." Dr. Whitman stepped forward. "Marshal, I formally request that this partnership be recognized as a unique conservation success story. These two have proven that coexistence is possible when it's based on mutual respect rather than dominance." Marshal Davis nodded slowly. "I'll recommend to the territorial authority that no further action be taken. This eagle is clearly free to choose her own path. As the official party departed, Jake felt his knees go weak with relief. Liberty hopped down from her perch and walked to his side, her presence a warm comfort against his leg. "We did it, girl," he whispered. "We proved that love doesn't have to mean capture.